Good morning. Good morning. It's good to see you all here and on this pleasant August day. Well, last week we heard Kim Mosley talk about happiness. And this week we'll continue on with a discussion of the Genjo Koan, which is a relatively short work, but it's dense. And we're only about 2/3 of the way through. But each little passage has a message. So we'll go to the text first. And this translation is by Waddell and Abe. When you have still not fully realized the Dharma in body and mind, you think it is sufficient. When the Dharma fills body and mind, you feel some lack. It is like boarding a boat and sailing into a broad and shoreless sea. You see nothing as you gaze about, but a wide circle of sea. Yet the great ocean is not circular. It is not square. It has other inexhaustible virtues. It is like a glittering palace. It is like a necklace of precious jewels. Yet it appears, for the moment, to the range of your eyes simply as an encircling sea. It is the same with all things. The dusty world and the Buddha way beyond may assume many different aspects, but we can see and understand them only to the extent that our eye is cultivated through practice. If you are to grasp the true and particular natures of all things, we must know that in addition to apparent circularity or angularity, there are inexhaustible great virtues in the mountains and seas. We must realize this inexhaustible store is present not only all around us, it is present right beneath our feet and within a single drop of water. So this first part is curious. So when you have not fully realized the Dharma, you think you're done. You think it is sufficient. When the Dharma fills your body and mind, you feel some lack. Well, first of all, a comment about the sea looking like a jeweled necklace or a palace. Dogen has inexhaustible references in his writings. And this one is to a 6th century Indian Buddhist philosopher who talked about how the varying aspects of water, how water looks different to different creatures, how to humans it just looks like water, to hungry ghosts, which are these sort of Buddhist figures that have very narrow necks and very large stomachs and are completely insatiable. To hungry ghosts, it looks like pus and blood because, that's so tempting, but they can't sate their thirst. To celestial beings, it looks like jewels. And to fish, it looks like a palace. So a wonderful place to live. And so Dogen uses this reference to talk about how things look different to different beings, and cites a certain lack. And I think this lack is related to the limitations of our perceptions, the limitations of our experience, the limitations of our knowledge, are the inherent human limitations that we have. So the lack is the lack of certainty. Of course, we're all limited by our experience, our karmic experience. We're limited, in an obvious way by our senses. We can only hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz. We're limited by our vision. We can't see parts of the spectrum. We can only see between red and violet. Of course, some other beings, like our cat, can hear frequencies much higher than we can. They share that with dogs, by the way. And we're we're limited in our ability to sense temperature, because if it gets too hot, our sense organs burn and they no longer function. And if it's too cold, they freeze and no longer function. So we have these inherent limitations, bodily limitations, but also limitations of mind. There's only so much we can keep in mind at any given moment. So realizing that fully leads to a certain sense of lack. In years past, I taught residents in obstetrics and gynecology, and one of the recurring themes among the first year residents was distress at the fact that various faculty members would manage a very similar situations in different ways. And they would express the desire to just know the right way. What's the right way to do things? So there must be a right way that leads to an optimal outcome. So what is it? Just tell me that. Don't confuse me with all these differences. But over time, they come to accept the fact that there is a range of right ways. There are certainly wrong ways. There are definitely wrong ways, but there are a range of right ways, and furthermore, those right ways change over time, because as we learn more, have more experience, or perhaps go through different, moods, different fads, that the right way of doing things, the range of the right way of doing things, changes over time. So that leads to a lack of certainty about what to do. But that lack of certainty, of course, can be paralyzing. And then you feel like, well, I don't know what to do, so I can't do anything. But I like to draw the distinction between certainty and clarity. Because I think even though we're sort of inherently uncertain, it is possible to have clarity about something and to act in accordance with that clarity. The other day, I was out in the front yard picking some tomatoes. We have several tomato plants in the backyard, but we have a couple in the front yard. And they were just starting to ripen. So I had 4 of them in my hand, and the Amazon delivery person showed up with a book and took it to the front door. And I don't know where the thought came from, but I just said, would you like some tomatoes? We've got plenty. It was a little out of character, but she smiled and said, "Oh, thank you, I'd love them," and took the tomatoes and went off in her truck. Now, of course, I could have gotten a response of, "We aren't allowed to accept gifts from clients," or, "Oh, no, thank you." Being suspicious of somebody giving you food, like that suspiciousness that's cultivated in our culture. But she seemed pleased, and it was kind of gratifying to share the tomatoes. So oftentimes we're acting out of a sense of more or less clarity, but inherent uncertainty. So Dogen's talking about how the world is different for each of us. We each have our unique set of experiences or set of habits, our unique proclivities, and we see the world differently. So in a way, there are 7.5 billion worlds. That comprise this human world. And I was thinking about a young Taliban fighter who's been assigned to man a checkpoint outside the Kabul airport. And what the world must be like for that person. Someone who has spent his entire life, really, living in a state of warfare. Someone who perhaps had some education, at a madrasa where the emphasis would have been on perhaps recitation of the Quran. Someone who was trained as a teenager to be a soldier and handle weapons. What the world must be like to that person. And how hopeless it is for that person to ever really understand what the world is like for me, or for me to understand what the world is like for him. So Dogen indicates to us that the whole story is ungraspable. And when you fully realize that, there is this inherent lack of certainty. I'd like to go back to the reading once again, but we'll look at a different translation. And this translation is by Aitken and Tanahashi. When Dharma does not fill your whole body and mind, you think it is already sufficient. When Dharma fills your body and mind, you understand that something is missing. For example, when you sail out in a boat to the middle of an ocean where no land is in sight and view the four directions, the ocean looks circular and does not look any other way. But the ocean is neither round nor square. Its features are infinite in variety. It is like a palace. It is like a jewel. It only looks circular as far as you can see at that time. All things are like this. Though there are many features in the dusty world and the world beyond conditions, you see and only understand what your eye of practice can reach. You see and understand only what your eye of practice can reach. In order to learn the nature of the myriad things, you must know that although they may look round or square, the other features of oceans and mountains are infinite in variety. Whole worlds are there. It is not so only around you, but also directly beneath your feet or in a drop of water. So you can see only what your eye of practice can reach. So that are some thoughts that I had about this little passage. Of course, those thoughts don't exhaust the passage, and I'd be interested in how you interpret some of this. What is this lack? And how is it possible for us to bridge that gap between the different worlds that we all experience? So I think I'll stop there, and then we'll break up into small groups at first, and then rejoin one another in a few minutes. Thank you for listening.